Things are changing in the Philippines here in 2023. And since I've been traveling a little bit around the Philippines this year, I started with a Manila trip at the beginning in January. We're now in February. I've done a little bit more, currently back in Davao. I want to talk about some observations that I've made, basically about 5 things that I'm seeing that are changing in 2023 compared to when I first arrived here in the Philippines back in March of 2022. Going to make this one a little bit different. I'm going to do a little walk and talk about the 5 things, but I'm going to kind of show you around this park as I'm talking, which is right across from the coffee shop where I go do co-working in Davao. The Philippines is much more open and the restrictions are being lifted here in 2023 compared to when I came back in 2022. So as a lot of you guys know, and I'll show you this park, as a lot of you guys know, the Philippines was in 2020, 2021, basically shut down. In cases they were locked down, you couldn't come into the country unless you had special exemptions. Tourists were basically absolutely prohibited from coming into the Philippines. And as a result, a lot of people that were here who were on tourist visas, they left as well. So you got a lot of foreigners that both exited the country and those that couldn't come back in. Businesses were shut down. There were crazy restrictions that you couldn't leave your house and things in the Philippines. And that's all changed. It started changing in 2022, but it is changing even more in 2023. So the big changes and how it has opened up is that tourists can actually come into the Philippines, and they can come in even if they haven't gotten a vaccination, if they haven't been jabbed in the arm. They don't have to quarantine. There are very few COVID restrictions as far as like wearing masks and stuff like that. Again, you don't have to do that unless you're on public transportation or you're in a hospital. But going into malls, going around about your business, walking around outside, you don't have to do that. Whereas before, not only do they have to wear masks, they had to wear face shields and stuff. So because those restrictions have been lifted, you can imagine what's coming next. Tourists have absolutely returned to the Philippines. So I went up on a trip back in January to Manila, and the whole time I had been here back in 2022 when I first arrived, saw very, very few foreigners around and about in the Philippines. And when I got back to Davao, I started seeing more and more what I would call basically retirees that were coming in. Maybe they were coming in to be with their girlfriends, or they just were retired here, or they were meeting people that they had talked to online, or they were just reuniting with families and stuff, or coming back to move permanently. But it was much more so than when I first got, and I very rarely saw, especially out in the province, many foreigners whatsoever. I was in the vanguard. I was one of the very early people who got back in 1 month after it had reopened to tourists, but it was a slow trickle. Part of that was because they still had restrictions in place. Well, now when I went to Manila, I started seeing all kinds of different people that were foreigners. I saw young people, I saw middle-aged people, I saw old people, I saw backpackers, I saw expats. It was just tons of travelers that were coming back to the Philippines as tourists. When I was at the airport, there were planes coming, unloading from Boracay, who had just flown in, unloading from Surigao, and all of these young travelers and tourists that were foreigners were coming in. Something I had not seen before. And so it's starting to reopen, and as a result, it's starting to get busy. It's going to be good for the Filipino economy, but it's also good for anybody who wants to travel to the Philippines and has been waiting the last several years. It's open. You can get in now, hopefully things will stay normal at this time. By the way, if you're enjoying this content, make sure that you hit the like button, because it tells YouTube that this is something worth watching, and also hit subscribe if you ever want to see content like this from me again in the future. The prices in the Philippines here in 2023 are rising. There has been inflation. Again, I'm going to show you around as we walk. But we are seeing some things are shortages, such as we're seeing a shortage in onions. That's been going on for quite a bit of time here in the Philippines. I went to this grocery store just the other day. One white onion, or yellow onion, as I would call it in the West, was $2, $2 US almost. It was 90 something pesos. And that is a lot of money for one onion. It's amazing how much those have increased. The cost of flights, because I suspect because the tourism has increased, maybe they don't have as many planes in action as they did before, but the costs in the last 2 months of domestic flights around the Philippines has started to go up compared to what I saw it as of last year. And I'm seeing other slightly inflationary effects at the grocery store in certain types of products. So that's not a good thing, and it is happening probably as a result of the mass opening and just some other changes that are happening here in the Philippines. Number 4, the schools have reopened, and this is huge. So when I first got here back in 2022, the beginning, schools were all done remotely. So the colleges, elementary schools, high school, everything was being done remotely. Well, that changed last year around August, and they slowly, at first it was a mixed use. It was some days they were in school, some days they were online, but now it's gone to being online pretty much, or not online, but offline, live and in person all the time. And that's had huge changes. Number 1, you're seeing all kinds of people out and about, whereas most of the time it was dead. You know, there was very little foot traffic and things going on when I first got here. That's all changed. Also, because the students are back in school, you're seeing businesses that were related to that reopen. So if you go by in the area I lived, for instance, in Digos before, where the college was, well, there was nothing there because the college had been closed for 2 years. Now there's all sorts of street food vendors, places where people can get lunches, they can do meetups, they can do study rooms and things. And that has started boosting the local economy, and you're seeing all sorts of activities. And because they go to school here, at least in the southern Philippines, both in the mornings and the afternoons and the evenings, they have different tiers when classes are happening. You're seeing economic activity all day long into the early evenings, and that is an incredible change compared to when everything was dead and closed up very early last year. So as a result of all of these, you can imagine that business opportunities and commerce, and that the Philippines is just, it's come back alive. So, you know, in the park today, this park's got lots of people. It's not a lot of people, but there's people hanging out, there's people dancing, there's activity that's going on, and this is right after a rain, and yet there's still people around hanging out in the park who've got out here very early. This thing will usually fill up once the sun comes up, and I don't know that we'll have the sun come up too much today, but it will actually start filling up very quickly with all kinds of students and stuff like that. Say hello to those folks over there and the cat. So as we will see, and I think this will continue on into the future, that the Philippines is going back to normal, which is the biggest change of all. For me personally, that's a blessing, because I've been waiting for different places in the world to actually be normal again, because I liked my normal life. I don't know. Did you? Tell me in the comments below what you think. So those are really the 5 things that I have noticed, at least major changes that I've seen since I first arrived here back in March of 2022, and now here in February of 2023. Remember, gang, life happens here in the Philippines.